Brazil's rising challenges in the New World Order. The rise and fall of world powers has been a focus of intense scholarly interest. From the fall of the Roman Empire to the dawn of U.S. hegemony in the second half of the 20th century, scholars of multiple disciplines have tried to assess whether the replacement of an established power by a rising one needs to involve major military conflicts. No agreement exists, but, in most cases, wars have expedited this type of transition, especially when the declining and rising powers do not share historical paths of cultural traditions. Regardless of the case, the world is witnessing today a crisis of the Western-centric domination of the last 400 years, with a likely return to an Asia-centered economic dominance. China has become the most significant economic player for Brazil, surpassing the United States. Within the BRICS, a loosely defined but nonetheless effective multilateral bloc that has helped reshape the economic and geopolitical balance of the world in the last 2 decades, both countries have come to pursue aligned projects to reshape the global context. Examples include the creation of the BRICS Bank, a multilateral funding agency for developmental projects in the Global South that could overshadow the traditional role played by the World Bank. Brazil seemed to be emerging on the world stage as the most promising democracy and diplomatic actor in the developing world. Now, in his 3rd mandate as president, Lula has the challenging tasks of rebuilding the country's democratic institutions and repositioning his country in the world after the tragic years of the troubling administration of Jair Bolsonaro. The timing for delivering on both fronts could not be worse, though. Interestingly, all Lula has tried to do in his foreign policy actions in his first months as president has been to try to revive the impressive achievements of his first administrations, when Brazil managed to sustain good relations with its traditional allies and trading partners, such as the United States and the European Union, while also expanding economic, diplomatic, and strategic projects with countries around the world, particularly among other rising powers, such as India and China. To promote his most recent goals, Lula attended a Community of Latin American and Caribbean Nations (CELAC) meeting in Buenos Aires, where Brazil declared its interest in strengthening its ties with the region. Soon after, he visited Biden in Washington, D.C., where both leaders professed their mutual defense for democracy and shared interests in more environmentally sound patterns of development, particularly in the Amazon region. After this trip, Lula visited China, where commercial agreements were signed, and then went to Europe to meet with traditional allies. Besides not acknowledging that the Brazilian leader visited both old and new allies, Lula's treatment from Brazilian and international media outlets lacks the necessary historical perspective. For over a century, Brazilian diplomatic efforts have defended multilateralism, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and self-determination. Moreover, its foreign policy has been largely defined by the need to serve as an instrument of the country's development. Therefore, Lula's overtures to traditional and new trading partners and defense of the need to find ways to resolve the stalemate in Ukraine are not surprising. Perhaps some of his statements about the war could have been phrased in more diplomatic language. However, he is right in pointing out that Brazil can serve as an intermediary towards peace, which in fact can only be achieved with Russia brought into the negotiation table, an invitation that Brazil has a privileged position to present. Speculations about Brazil's shifting allegiances in the rising economic, geopolitical, and diplomatic rivalry between the US and China notwithstanding, the fact is that Brazil can't afford to pick a side in these disputes. If China now exerts tremendous economic influence in carrying over the bulk of Brazil's impressive agribusiness exports, Brazil's economic, cultural, diplomatic, and historical ties to the United States and Europe are not to fade anytime soon. It is unclear whether Lula can revive the balancing act that he conducted so well 20 years ago. Economic and geopolitical global disputes are ever more prone to include a military dimension, and the war in Eastern Europe has no end in sight. Although Brazil could indeed play a peacemaking role, neither side of the conflict seem ready to talk peace.